napkins
make
in the cabinet.
for people to
Hundreds of thousands of them.
Because
I forgot to
clearly,
bring
like,
that.
we need an RS compact. So it's like, do we use one
We
of
have,
ours? Do
we have,
just
up there on the
use
top
a
one,
new
we have
one?
white
Like, just
ones
make
and we
one
have those
that's
pink ones.
temporary
and-
Well, I guess your
Yellow ring.
CAP mail would do it. Anybody can mail it.
That's true, but then I don't know.
Hey, one more minute.
Like, I don't like but
You don't want what?
get a bunch of random.
Took us
emails,
20
but
minutes, Roger.
If it has to
You can
be-
sit anywhere you want.
Look at that card.
Right here in this spot.
It's got a 383 stroker. Super Sport.
That'll be fun if you get it.
Yeah.
You got Bob's seat there.
I know, I feel bad, I'm like, well, it's a crowded
Sit right
house
here.
today
It's like in the
anyway.
middle.
Take my chair.
Oh, is nobody sitting here?
Nobody's sitting
Oh,
right
okay.
there.
Don't worry, I can sit over here, I don't mind.
Okay,
You took
Bob?
my chair, now you're gonna leave it?
Yeah.
I was keeping it, I was warming it up for you.
Oh, yeah, I
Come
know.
on, Bob. Take the
I'll
chair.
stay over lawn tonight.
Roger and Bob's
Yeah.
both
All
scared
right.
Stay where
her
you
out
are.
of there.
Stay where you are.
Alright, I'll stay here.
That's the safety officers over there. I wanna be by myself tonight.
Hey, what is that? What?
I wanna see what they got to say. Oh, peanut butter, thank you.
You bet, that's my favorite, that's why
I had a peanut butter and jelly day. I didn't wanna make a
Someone's a
sandwich, I was in a hurry.
Sounds good.
Okay, everybody's ready?
yes, sir.
Please stand.
I remain seated.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Go on.
Okay, it's been a little while. Bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for having a place here to come to and fellowship with other members of the Civil Air Patrol. Be with us as we perform our duties, Lord, and try to help our community and our country. Be with our troops and their families, Lord, to give them the resources that they need and the comfort that they need. Be with Israel as they're going through this trying times. Lord, and be with us this evening. Learn something. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Before we start safety meeting, a few updates. On aircraft, we currently do not have aircraft. Our aircraft is up north. The Palm Springs aircraft went back home to Palm Springs. We tried to get the Northern California aircraft here at Riverside. I flew there in attempt to relocate it here, and it didn't work out. The aircraft, I aborted takeoff. So it's actually a good safety subject. I will say a few words about it. So I knew the aircraft was recently out of major overhaul, so the engine was overhauled and reinstalled on aircraft. It was still going through break-in period. Then it was taken to Imperial for a counter-drug mission, and second or third day, I don't recall exactly, crew experienced, in the morning, a partial power loss on takeoff. So they managed to make for them it was possible U-turn and landed safely. They tried to reproduce the issue on the ground, they couldn't. So the aircraft is there now for 2 months. And the mechanic attempted replacing both magnetos. Then they replaced the whole electrical wiring harness for the ignition, and apparently it didn't work. So I was given an opportunity to fly it back. I did this very thorough pre-flight check. I did a very detailed and lots of attention to small detail run-up. There was no problem in the run-up. There was no problem in pre-flight check, other than during the run-up, the mag drop was 150 both, which is kind of high for the brand new magnetos, but it was within the limits. So I rehearsed multiple times, what do I do if I lose the engine and take off? So I was very much ready for any abnormalities. I started takeoff roll, full power, normal RPM settings, it was max RPMs, full power, and about quarter of a runway I reached almost takeoff speed. It was somewhat above 50 knots, and I experienced sudden drop in power, significant enough aircraft to slow down quite a bit. It didn't lose completely power, but it slowed down. And then it came back. And the whole event lasted, I don't know, maybe a few fractions of a second. But the other pilot who had brought me to Imperial actually observed the same. So he saw the change, he saw the slowdown, and he heard the change in the engine noise. So I immediately aborted takeoff. I used about 30% of the runway at that point of time, so there was plenty. I exited. I tried to see if I experienced the same with a little bit of a speed taxi, but it doesn't pronounce itself at that power settings. So I called it off. I called the wing maintenance officer. They referred me to the mechanic who did the job. I explained what I experienced to him. I re-emphasized that it happened at the full power. So probably something to do with induction system. God knows. So let them figure it out. So always be ready for unexpected. So things happen when we don't wait for them to happen most of the time. Be vigilant about flying, especially if you are flying. Be vigilant about the weather. Keep your eyes open, ears
Package.
centered on noise changes and everything. So
I have some issues here. So you got two magnetos. Were they overhauled that he changed out, or did he just overhaul them there on the bench?
I don't know the details. I was told the magnetos were replaced.
So, okay, so they're replaced and you got both magnetos doing 150 on the drop. To me, that says that the magnetic field on the armature wasn't up enough, therefore it's producing that. That's the first thing. Why he changed all of the ignition wires without doing an ohms check, it kind of bothers me a little bit. That's the first thing. They don't go bad that often. And then secondly, even though it's electrical, I say it's fuel. Fuel. So you never took a pressure test on the fuel for RPM. There's charts that you can do on that. Even though you're maybe reading something on the gauge for fuel pressure in regards to that, he never did those three things. That's what bothers me about this mechanic.
Right.
And yet you're still getting a loss of power. It's not ignition. 10 to 1 it's fuel.
Well,
And
I
it's
talked to our
momentarily.
mechanic, here, and he agrees it's a fuel issue.
Yeah.
Not
so
electrical issue.
After I explained what happened, that mechanic now made the same suggestion that it's something to do with fuel. He asked me if it felt like fuel exhaustion. I cannot tell because I didn't notice the drop in fuel flow. It was so fast. But I suggested to download the logger data that's supposed to have all the details. Nobody obviously flew that aircraft, so it's a solid state storage. Yeah. They're supposed to have all the details. And it really bugged me, on the other hand, why they didn't do it before.
Yeah.
We have an engine, very sophisticated engine monitor in this kind of aircraft, and not using this kind of tools is strange.
I've had a dead magneto where it had a brand new coil in it. And go to the mag and the thing would just die.
But by the way, Bob, the standard procedure for mags, for CAP, we send them to our mag shop, they overhaul them or fix them or whatever, and they send them back. We don't let anybody do any mag work in the field,
Yeah.
typically.
Well, this came out of a shop.
Was
Yeah,
that-
nice-
which
yeah, nice
aircraft was
magnetos.
What's that?
What aircraft?
968 Charlie Papa. I
But
filed
you
my
said
first
periodically
safety
you get a
report.
new coil and it'll fail on you.
Oh, yeah. Anything can fail.
Yeah.
New used or otherwise, anything can fail.
So that's the story. That's actually the reason we do not have an aircraft. We were supposed to swap that aircraft with 743 Charlie Papa,
Do we-
and because
Do we still have 626, the Nevada bird here?
no,
They came and
they,
got it?
they took it. Yeah.
Oh, darn.
So
Can't keep up.
the 743 Charlie Papa apparently is not coming back because that group where the broken aircraft belongs doesn't have any aircraft.
Well, they're only a few hours away from 100 hours, so
Yes.
So somewhere I heard that our old turbo 182 347
well,
got
437 was a Turbo 206.
437.
yeah 437
Yeah. Turbo 206.
that it got hit.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was properly parked, and some other pilot was taxiing and
Lost control.
used the tip of the wing hitting the prop of 437.
437.
And at first he basically hit and run, he disappeared, and then he had guts to come back to the airport and blame that someone hit his aircraft. And they brought the footage up,
Yeah, the airport tapes, yeah.
and they found out that he did it actually. He hit our aircraft. So now he's on the hook, I guess, for liability.
So
Sure.
theoretically, we have to take the prop off and have the prop checked and do an engine overhaul.
Well, the bad thing
Theoretically.
about that event, that aircraft was flown after the event quite a few times.
Is what?
The 437 was flying after the incident because
Right.
nobody knew it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't notice any nicks in the prop at all?
They didn't look.
Oh,
Well, they're
enough
supposed
for
to,
us.
they're supposed to look at nicks, but there may not have been any nicks.
Tell me who was the wing commander that flew it?
That wasn't wing commander who was flying it, by the
No?
way. It was the Cap Yusuf.
The Cap Youssef?
Gentleman who is in charge of whole California wing. Anyway, so that's the situation with aircraft. And we are not getting Zelda back until we give 743 Charlie back. So it's kind of
Well,
chain
Zelda's in the
of
shop
events.
too, so.
Zelda is in the shop too for prop also, by the way, yes. So there is an issue, suspicion that there is something wrong with the governor or the prop. So it's waiting analysis. Last time I checked was a week ago. I don't know any news since then.
I'm gonna call Gary and tell him that they just need to give us a brand new 182.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Terry tries. You have no. I mean, he copies. pretty
Well, we'll
much,
take
I
a
think,
Turbo
all of us.
182.
Okay.
So
Okay.
speaking of which, I can
G1000, yeah, well,
actually
they're all
give
G1000.
some.
NXI, by the way, you gotta have an NXI now.
I will give
Anybody here
some-
checked out an NXI yet? No.
Took the
So I
test.
will find that report, which was generated by Terry. Operations report for the last fiscal year. So highlights. The aircraft we had assigned to us finished number 1 in flight hours in the whole wing. With total hours flown 441 and a half. Second place was short by almost 70 hours from us. Our aircraft finished number 1 flown for actual A missions over 202 hours. The second place is 54 hours behind. 743 Charlie Papa finished number 1 for all cadet rides with 93.9 hours. Second is 14 hours behind. So we have flown that aircraft a lot with very few pilots. And the whole objective here is to show we are extremely active group, not just squadron, but the group, because essentially it's a group asset. And it's not just me and Terry who was flying this aircraft, it was other pilots in the group.
I had a few in there.
This information was sent to the new incoming wing commander. It's expected that there will be some action taken in the new fiscal year to address the aircraft usage and really give this group and our squadron what we deserve. By the way, the wing was expecting some new aircraft based on information we have shared last fiscal year in the beginning with, and I did not see any deliveries. So I will certainly follow up with wing operations officer what's going on with that, and if any expectations to have new aircraft in the wing, and what kind of aircraft. So we will see.
We typically get 2 aircraft a year.
And there
However,
was no deliveries for several years in a row.
yeah, typically we get 2 aircraft a year. However, almost always 1 or 2 of those aircraft has to be decommissioned. So in other words, we get 2 in and 2 out. So we have the same amount. We have roughly about 26 aircraft in the wing.
Yes. Well, the second aircraft in the group was also flown quite a bit. So 887 Charlie Papa had total 265.2 hours last year and finished number 5 in the wing for actual missions flown. And number 3 in the wing for all rides. So we certainly fly our aircraft more than required. And we fly not for, self-funded flights. We have actually very little self-funded flights on this aircraft. So that should be noted. That said, I also would like to give you reminders before I pass aboard for a few updates to other members. The week conference is going to have 2 more days to register, so if you are interested or thinking about it, the deadline is very near. I think it's a good experience to go at least once, and you do need 2 conferences for your advancement to level 3. Level 2 it's not a requirement, but for level 3 it will be. And there is no expiration, so you can attend our conference and maybe attend the virtual conference down the road and you fulfill that requirement. So keep that in mind. There was an announcement on the professional level 2 classes, which will be held at Whiteman Airport, if I recall correctly, so check your emails. So if you have trouble accessing your emails, please don't stay quiet, escalate it to Chris, for example, and he can help you reset your password and whatnot. So please check your emails at least, a couple of times a week, because there is a lot of information going around. With that said, I'd like to give the word to Michelle so she can give an update on our fundraiser quickly, and we will continue with the safety.
So I was able to, since the website,
Speak up.
since the website didn't have any, they were out of stock for recruitment material. They said you can find the information to download. It took me forever to find it. Thankfully, after much hours of searching and a lot of frustration, I was able to find a few downloaded material. I was able to change the QR code to our website as well as the CAP National. So they're both for adult members, youth, educators, aerospace educators, and pilots and aircraft. So some of these have our QR code on it, and some have the national wing QR code. I was also able to find some information on what CAP is all about from 2023, as well as our REITs across America. Also, because we are partnering with Corona Cadet Squadron 29, I was able to print out a sign-up sheet for them. So if anyone wants to sign up for cadets, they have one, and then we also have one as well. And last but not least, we were able to figure out how to print business cards. This was the bane of our existence. It took us forever to get these done. Between Windows, Mac, Apple, we actually got it done finally. So we got about 70 of these. I put it under Chris's aerospace education. And it has our Squadron 5 website, QR code on the back, and of course Chris's phone number on the front. So we have some of these to pass out. And I was also hoping we could take our flag as well with us. The Squadron 5 flag, because I think 29 is also bringing theirs with their banner, and I think that they said the car as well, right?
Yeah, they'll be bringing the van that they have.
Yes.
And we'll be setting up in front of there, so the van will be in the parking lot, and we'll be setting up right in front of the van, so like it'll be police cars, fire truck, cop van.
Yes.
I know we don't have an airplane, but can we put an airplane out there if we get one?
I told them, I said, I don't know if we even have a plane to give you, and they said, oh, we don't have room for another plane anyway, so
Okay.
they're fully loaded on planes.
But it sounds like it's going to be a great event.
What day is that?
That is this Saturday. Anybody will, we haven't got a sign-up sheet, but we need to get some commitments for people who can be there, so we can get that information to the cafe. So because they have to have wristbands for any of the volunteers, so that they know who's allowed to be where they're allowed to be.
So far, Squadron 29 said they have about 5 cadets.
As of last week,
last week.
and they're hoping for a few more this week.
So sounds like everything's good to go. So
Great.
Unless you guys have anything else to add, they've been instrumental, by the way. So Chuck and Chris. So
Very
yeah,
good.
and that's where we're at. You can come and peruse if you need to look at it more.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, and Harper, if we have time left, I will give you a word at the end, so we have to get to the safety subject, which is foremost importance for our today's meeting. So, the word is to Chuck, the Assistant Safety Officer, please. If you want to show video on Teams, then we will probably have to do it this way. Share full screen. And
You just make it full screen once
make
it's,
it
okay.
full screen. Chris, can you see the YouTube screen, which is black for now?
Yeah.
Chris is asleep. Was too boring.
No, it just takes me a while to get to my mute. I cannot, it's just a blank screen right now.
It's a black screen, yes. So in a moment.
Yeah.
It will stay.
Good.
All right.
All right, I see it.
All right, good evening, everybody. This is my first safety briefing meeting, so be gentle. What I want to discuss this evening is passenger safety briefings. So although it's directed primarily at general aviation, in other words, if you're flying people in your private plane or whatever, I think there's some good lessons here for us in CAP, not only for the pilots, but for crew members. There's some good things they bring out that I think it's important that everybody should know, as far as operating radios, having your own personal equipment in case the aircraft does make an emergency landing. Simple stuff, emergency blanket, whistle, signaling mirror, something to start a fire with. I'm not advocating a book of matches or whatever, but there is a Fresnel lens in here too that you could start a small fire with if you needed to. You guys are welcome to look at this stuff when we're done. Costs about $20 to put a decent little kit this size that would really be important if you do wind up in the wilderness somewhere. So again, important to keep that in mind. It's about a 15-minute video. It's a little bit old, but again, there's a lot of good info. So let me get that started and then we can discuss afterwards. Yes, sir.
By the way, in our checklist for Civil Air Patrol, it does have passenger briefing. So we're
Right.
supposed to do a passenger briefing every time.
Agreed, and
So-
and honestly, I've had very good CAP pilots on the few flights that I've gone to as far as crew members. Not all of them were exactly the same. There wasn't a lot of discussion about where satellite phones were located, where, if there were any.
Which we don't use anymore.
Right, if there were any. There wasn't a lot of instruction on the radio. However, as each of us go through our qualifications for, scanners and mission radio operators and things like that, you should be learning how to operate those radios. But even as pilots, your primary job is the aviation radio, but in an emergency, it's going to be really important if that aviation radio is down that you're able to operate the cap radio. Usually it's
Technotronics.
Technotronics radio on the far right-hand side. But we can have more discussion about that. Let me get this going here.
Every day, general aviation aircraft depart on thousands of flights, the vast majority of them incident-free. But for about 4 a day on average, the landings aren't so happy. Most of these accidents are relatively minor, but whatever the severity, passengers aboard the aircraft fare better if they have basic knowledge to help them survive the crash, get out of the aircraft, and contact rescue personnel. In this video, we'll look at what you as a pilot can do to maximize their chances. As student pilots, we were all taught to give passengers a short safety briefing prior to every flight. But with the check ride long past and the Hobbs meter running, there's sometimes a tendency to gloss over the briefing, or even skip it. After all, it's simple stuff that everybody knows, right? That's not really the case. If there's one rule that applies to everything we'll cover, it's not to make assumptions about what non-pilot passengers do and don't know. So let's take a look at what they need to know. The most obvious item in any safety briefing, and the only one specifically required by the FARs, is the use of seat belts and harnesses.
The most critical thing in surviving a general aviation accident, if there's a chance to survive, is the restraint that you're wearing, or in some cases not wearing.
Passengers are required to wear lap belts, and if available, shoulder harnesses during taxi, takeoff, and landing. Like the airlines, you need to be sure they put them on. And also like the airlines, urge them to keep at least their lap belts fastened the entire flight. Most people are familiar with airplane-style seatbelt latches, but don't just assume that. Demonstrate how the latches work, as well as how the shoulder harness attaches to the lap belt, if you have the two-piece variety. If the aircraft has multi-point harnesses, this part of the briefing should get significantly more emphasis.
We have different kinds of seatbelts in general aviation aircraft that are on transport category aircraft or that are on your car. So it's not just push a button, it's lift a latch, or in some cases it's turn a rotary buckle. There may be a 4-point restraint involved, and this may be someone's first flight in that kind of a restraint.
As an aside, many older aircraft were certified without shoulder belts and can fly legally without them. That said, a recent NTSB study found that the risk of serious injury or death in a crash is 50% higher when only the lap belt is used. Bottom line, it's money well spent to have shoulder belts installed.
So equipping your aircraft, especially with shoulder harnesses and using them at all times, is the first step you can keep yourself safe, because there's no point in discussing the post-crash environment or post-crash search and rescue if you don't survive the accident to begin with.
For aircraft owners, it's also worth noting that seatbelt mounted airbag systems are now available for many light aircraft. These are effective in preventing the blunt force injuries to the face and abdomen many accident victims suffer.
We've actually had a pilot that died due to hypothermia, successfully had a forced landing, but searchers didn't find this individual for over 4 or 5 days, and they had survived with little injury, only to die of exposure because they had no clothing suitable for the terrain that they were happened to have wrecked at. And that's one thing I would brief passengers ahead of time, that pretend you have to stay overnight wherever it is we're flying over, and be sure to bring adequate clothes for that eventuality.
Getting out of the aircraft after the crash is the next issue. Doors are the most obvious means of escape, but even more than with seatbelts, this is a place where you shouldn't make assumptions about passenger knowledge.
You'd be surprised how many people, given a circumstance where they've been thrown into an accident scenario, have difficulty simply opening a door. Because doors on aircraft don't operate a lot of times just like they do on a car.
Be sure to explain in clear terms exactly how to unlatch cabin doors. It may even be worth having a new passenger walk through the steps once just to be sure. This is especially true in aircraft with multiple latches, like Pipers, or ones that require 2 actions at once, Beach Bonanzas, for example. In a crash landing, one major concern is that the fuselage will deform and cause the doors to bind. You can probably skip this for a normal briefing, but prior to an emergency landing, have passengers open a door and jam something in to hold it open, a coat or whatever else they can find. Failing that, re-engaging the latch while holding the door open will usually keep it from closing again. If the doors are blocked, windows can be broken as a means of escape. If you have a special tool for this, let passengers know where it is. Otherwise, kicking will generally break or dislodge plexiglass windows.
Maryland State Police had a Trooper 2 helicopter crash a few years ago just outside of Andrews Air Force Base, 3 miles off the end of the runway. And it took them more than 2 hours to find the accident scene. The helicopter route was being actively tracked with ADSB at the time, with providing 1-second updates to its position. It was shocking for a lot of people how 3 miles off the end of the runway where the president lands, where you have a highly urban environment and you have all the technology available, it can still take a long time just to even recognize that there had been an accident. So you see that it's not just as simple as, well, I don't fly very far from home, so I don't need to think about this stuff.
Cabin fires in flight are relatively rare, but they do happen, and they're deadly serious. If you don't have a fire extinguisher, we highly recommend you buy one. Halon extinguishers are by far the best choice for use in aircraft, and they're relatively inexpensive. Be sure to mount the extinguisher in a location where it's easily accessible in flight, and point it out to passengers during your safety briefing.
Survival equipment of any kind is beneficial, and you can get a very simple survival kit, which can include very small and lightweight items for pretty cheap. In fact, one of the things I tell people is that next time someone's asking you for a birthday gift, a Christmas gift, or something, is a $50 gift card to any sort of camping store out there. You can put one together yourself. That's fantastic. You can buy some Mylar blankets, signaling mirror, whistle. I mean, very small, very lightweight items that can make a big difference.
And I love space blankets because not only are they great signal devices, they're very shiny. You can lay them out. You can make all sorts of signals with that. But it's afterwards, and it's a survival aspect of that to have something to retain body heat.
Imagine yourself as a non-pilot passenger in an aircraft that's just crash landed. The pilot is unresponsive, and the other passengers are gravely injured. Your only hope of survival is to be rescued soon. But you're deep in the wilderness. Will anyone know where to look? How will you call for help? It's not a common situation, but it has happened before, notably in the crash that killed Senator Ted Stevens. Crash survivors have found themselves stranded in remote areas with communications gear close at hand, but without the critical knowledge they needed to locate and use it. There's no way to plan for every possible contingency, but you should make it a point to tell passengers about any emergency communication gear and survival equipment aboard the aircraft. In other words, if I were incapacitated, what would they need to know to get help? Here are some examples of information to include. For communication, handheld transceivers are a good place to start.
If a pilot has a handheld, just as long as their passengers know the existence of a handheld and how to turn it on to 1215 and push the talk switch, that can bring a lot of help very quickly. If they have cell phone, turn it on. Even if they have no signal and can't reach anybody, leave it on. Because sometimes cell phone forensics allow us to at least get some trace signal and figure out where the wreck site is.
It's also a good idea to give a brief introduction to the aircraft's built-in radios. Point out where the master switch, avionics master, and transmit button are located, as well as how to tune in the emergency frequency. In some aircraft, the ELT can be turned on with a switch in the cockpit. If the aircraft is so equipped, show passengers where the switch is. Some pilots carry personal locator beacons, or PLBs. These are often more effective than normal 121.5 megahertz ELTs.
PLBs are another good technology. They're less expensive than an ELT, but what you lose there is the automatic crash activation. So you actually have to have manual user intervention to set it off. And we've had a number of cases where pilots are incapacitated or die in the accident, in which a 406 PLB would have been useless because the passengers in the aircraft didn't know it existed.
Aircraft that operate in remote areas are sometimes equipped with satellite phones. If there's one aboard, make sure your passengers know about it. In the Ted Stevens crash, a functional satellite phone sat unused for hours, simply because none of the passengers knew it was there. While reviewing communication gear, brief passengers about any survival equipment aboard the aircraft. The bottom line is, if something in the aircraft could help your passengers get help or survive longer at the accident scene, be sure to tell them about it.
And it doesn't need to be a 10-minute briefing every time you get an aircraft. But if you have a new, naive passenger in an aircraft, these are good things to tell them before you take off.
Now, let's listen to an example of a real-life briefing.
Alright guys, before we get started today, I just want to take a couple of minutes to give you all a quick safety briefing. First of all, please make sure that your seatbelts are buckled. In this airplane, they work just the way they do in a car. Please leave them on for the entire flight, just in case we hit some turbulence or something like that. Also, the doors in this airplane are a little different than normal. So the main canopy here has just one latch over here by me. And to open, you're just going to pull the latch back and lift up. The rear canopy is the same. Now, I'm not expecting any problems, but if something were to happen and we had to make a crash landing and the doors jammed, you could try kicking out the windows with your feet. And there's a fire extinguisher mounted on the wall by your feet, Kristen. Alright, like I said, I'm not expecting any problems, but just in case, we are going to be flying over some rough territory today, and I want to go over a couple of things in case something were to happen and I couldn't help you. All this stuff is printed on safety cards in your seat pockets, so it's okay if you don't remember it all. Alright, first, to signal rescuers, there is an emergency radio beacon. Now, it should come on automatically, but there's also a switch over here if you can want to turn it on manually. Right, now, your cell phones might not work, and if that's the case, you'll have to use a radio to call for help. It's probably best to use the handheld radio I keep in my flight bag first. You just turn the knob to turn it on, hold down on the mic button, and talk. It's already set to the emergency frequency, which is 121.5. Now, don't give up too easily. You might have to call for a long time before someone hears you. Now, if that doesn't work, you're going to have to use the main radio, and that's a little more complicated. First, you have to make sure that the red battery switch over here is turned on. You can use this knob here to tune to the emergency frequency, which is 121.5. Hit the double arrow button here, and press down on the button on the stick to transmit. You're going to have to use the headset to listen and talk. Finally, in the baggage area behind the back seats, there's a small survival kit in an orange box. It's got a first aid kit in there as well as some other gear. Also, by the way, for flagging down rescue planes, the silver space blanket works really well, just so you know. Alright, that's about it. Do you guys have any questions? No? Alright, let's get going.
It's a very bad idea to wander away from that accident site. Unless you can see the road or civilization or something that's very close by, then it's definitely a bad idea, because more times than not, we will find the accident site first. And trying to spot a person from the air is almost impossible. In the wilderness, for instance, something that may look like it's just a 1 hour walk away could turn into a full day. In other words, you could get yourself so lost that after they find the airplane, they may never find you.
Before we go, here are a few other points to help you give an effective briefing. First, it's best to do the briefing prior to starting the engine, rather than just before takeoff. You'll be less tempted to rush, and the passengers will be less distracted. Take your time, and specifically point out the locations of items. Second, try to see things from the non-pilot's perspective. Sure, the radio seems simple, but is it really? Have you actually thought through the steps required to use it? Things that are obvious to us as pilots may be anything but obvious to passengers, particularly when they've just been in an accident. Last but not least, a point that's as important as anything we've talked about so far. In the grand scheme of things, perhaps the biggest favor you can do your passengers is to make sure someone will be looking for them in a reasonable period of time after an accident.
In all the cases where we found an accident site quickly, they were inevitably had a flight plan and they were following the flight plan. That's the most important thing that pilots can do to maximize survivability, is to be where we expect to find them.
It's also a good idea to have a safety briefing card with emergency communications and survival information accessible from every passenger seat in the aircraft. The Air Safety Institute has developed a free, customizable briefing card you can download and use. Find it at www.airsafetyinstitute.org. No one likes to dwell on the possibility of an accident, particularly when introducing non-pilots to GA. But for most passengers, a briefing like this is actually reassuring. It shows your professionalism and concern for their well-being and lets them know that you take safety seriously. Odds are they'll never have to use the information, but if the worst ever happens, it might just save their lives.
All right, so I do have a couple of examples of the briefing cards that they mentioned, and I'll put it up when, I will put it up in the team's safety area, but it's just a link. They're real simple. For $1, you can take them down to, once you get them filled out, take them down to Staples or whatever, and they can laminate them for you. I think it's about $1 a piece. Some of the things they discussed as far as individual safety equipment. Now, every CAP airplane has some survival kit material in the back, but the thing that you don't know is that going to be crushed inside the fuselage where you can't get to it? You need to make sure you take care of yourself. And this is for pilots, crew, no matter who you are. You know, the basics. You want to be able to be heard, be seen, stay warm, those kind of things in order to survive. Simple Fresnel lens, real plastic, costs $1 a piece or whatever if you order a few of them. Great to start fires. If you need reading glasses, they can help you with that too if you lose those in the crash. Emergency blanket, again, $2 or $3 a piece if you order them in bulk, and maybe we can do it as a squadron if a lot of people need them. You just throw them in your flight bag and forget about them, forget that they're there. Whistle, if you're stranded somewhere and you can hear people coming and things like that, if you haven't had a lot of water to drink and things like that, you're not going to want to be sitting there screaming and yelling. Blowing a loud whistle will make it a lot easier. A couple of other things. This is called a life straw. You can use it to drink water if there's water in the area where you go down. Cleans the water up. You don't have to worry about getting some god-awful disease. They're pretty cheap. I think they're $20 a piece. They weigh nothing. Again, this is optional, but you can get small packets of water. They sell them at different survival things. I think Amazon sells them. You can buy a case of them. They're packets of water that you can keep in your thing. I wouldn't put a bunch in because you don't want to weigh that much. But any questions about anything that they discussed or I've discussed?
I'd like to add a little bit of details. So think about survival gear in these terms, okay? In aircraft crash, you may not be able to grab that bag which sits in the back. Whatever is on you is survival gear. Whatever is in the airplane is camping gear. You may lose all your camping gear in a jiffy and never be able to retrieve it. Maybe the aircraft tail broke off and the stuff just spread over the forest, over the mountain side. So keep that in mind. So what I do when I fly long distance, I put fisherman jacket. It's a bright yellow color, it has a lot of pockets and all the survival gear in those pockets. The first aid kit, multi-tool, the glass crashing tool and a bunch of stuff Chuck just showed you. Build one for yourself. There are a lot of examples what pilots do on YouTube, online in general. Think about different options and think what immediately can save your life and life of your passenger, and include that in their safety briefing. Tell them, hey, this is stuff on me. If I'm non-responsive, take it off me when you depart the aircraft. Or when you come back, take it off me, whatever works. When you fly over the water, make sure your passengers have life vest on, not in the back of the airplane. You may not have enough time to retrieve it and put it on. It would be too bad. You may be safely on the water, but passenger drowned because he couldn't get the vest on in a rush. Okay? Anything?
The only last thing I would add, a signaling mirror. They're cheap, they're lightweight, they weigh nothing, but it can make a huge difference on you being seen or not seen. So,
Can you start a fire with that?
With the signaling mirror?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Because in the middle there is a magnifying glass.
Oh no, that one.
No.
This one I don't think.
This
has
one-
Yeah,
it.
what the center thing is
That's your
you're
sight.
aiming at
Some
a
of them
helicopter
have.
or airplane.
Right.
When you aim with looking through that, then that light that reflects off of that goes right to that airplane.
Yeah, and
That's
there's
why it's
instructions
there.
on the back. These
Yeah.
were like, I think, $10 on Amazon
Oh, yeah,
or
they're
something.
really,
I think you
those
can get
are
'em for
probably,
like
that's
3,
even more
actually.
important than just about everything
Yeah,
else is the
and
mirror.
again, glass is a good idea. They sell plastic ones, and sometimes those don't work too well. This one, again, I think it was like $10 or something. So, again, important to keep on you, as Andre said. If it's not on you and you've got to bail out of that plane because it's on fire or whatever, it's probably going to get left behind. So, yes, sir.
Would it be a good idea to put a gallon of water aboard Squadron airplanes?
We usually do fly with water. Too much water, I don't know. I mean,
8 pounds.
it's gonna go bad, but
Even if you landed off airport,
we don't
you
fly
could drink
long
it.
distance.
Right.
Lon, do we still have the water packets in our safety
Yes.
packs? So we carry a certain amount, just not very much, but enough to keep you hydrated until somebody comes.
Yeah, they're
And
just
ours-
little envelopes of
Yeah.
water.
Yeah, we have them in our safety
Right.
kit in the back.
Right, and everybody should have that in their car too, by the way. I mean, we live in earthquake world. You don't want to get stuck somewhere and not have that in your
Actually,
car.
yes.
And we can do that in another safety meeting when you go through a
It's
car
a-
kit. Yes, sir.
I just want to also point out, the video obviously was showing older cell phones, but and it talked about sat phones. But if anybody who has an iPhone 14 or newer, you've got a satellite phone built into it too. So
Really?
yes,
Did not know that.
So that's another safety feature. It's one of the big safety things. I think they even showed it when they demoed it in a
Show me how to use that later.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's something else you have in terms of safety and communications.
The main point is just be cognizant of it, especially if you're flying family and people and cadets that have never seen an airplane radio. I mean, as crew people or pilots, we should be relatively familiar with the radios and all of that. But there's other people that have absolutely no idea how to operate one. So, all right. Yes, sir.
Just one thing, and this is only a suggestion, back, there was a movie that was made, I think it was around 1978, that was called I Alone Survived. If you could ever get to see that movie, and actually you can find, my wife is really good at finding those things on TV by just searching, you know. I Alone Survived, and it was an actual, it was a plane crash that actually did take place, and they, of course, made a movie off of it. And it was basically real quick. It was 3 people who, the pilot was not real wise. He thought he could fly a 172 over the Sierra Nevadas, over into Bishop, trying to use the way the wind blows up over the mountains and just boost the airplane over the top. Well, he didn't make it, of course, and he crashed. Yeah, everybody, pilots, I just looked at that. Anyhow, the one person, it was a lady who knew nothing about airplanes, zero. But I'll tell you that movies, for pilots to watch that, really sobers you up. I mean, you're like, because the whole movie, of course, was on her surviving, because he was, you know, the wheel hit him here. He eventually ended up dying from that. The passenger already was half dead, and so she was by herself. And there was no way, you know, that they kept searching for them, but way down below, they didn't even think that an idiot would try to fly a 172 over the mountains, and of course they never went up to that point. And she eventually survived it by climbing down the mountains all the way into Bishop. Yeah, from the top of those mountains after weeks. And she survived, and then of course they made the movie off of that. But I'll tell you, it really, man, you watch that movie and you kind of go, whoa, okay. I'm going to make sure, you know, what we're talking about tonight, we do.
Right.
Yeah, I would also recommend there are series. I watched them on Amazon Prime, but it might be available elsewhere. It's the series called I Shouldn't Be Alive. And there are a few episodes dedicated to aviation accidents, mountain flying related and whatnot. So quite a lot of useful information. So it's hard to be ready for everything, but if you at least mentally prepared and you mentally prepare your passengers about possibilities of survival and have proper tools for them to, you know, stay alive, go for it. Do whatever it takes. And you don't have to carry a lot of weight to enable passengers and yourself to get out of the people.
All right, thank you.
One more, I'll show you an example of a pilot's family making a video for passenger briefing. Just for fun. It's short, it's 2.5 minutes.
Good news, we're going flying.
In Sears, no less.
And everyone gets a prime window seat.
And since safety is the #1 priority on every flight,
how about a quick message from your captain?
Me!
No, me! The 2 main cabin doors are your exit.
They're opened by pulling up on the handle and pushing the door out.
Simple!
Closed by pulling the door into a closed position.
And push the door handle down until it clicks.
Perfect! In the unlikely event when you need to make an emergency exit and the doors won't open,
remove the hammer from the center armrest lid.
Then strike each corner of the plexiglass window.
And push the window out. If you're riding in the back seat, sit back, relax, and buckle up just like you would in the car.
Enough said. But if you're lucky enough to sit up front with me,
you'll get a cool pilot seatbelt.
Pull the 2 shoulder harnesses over your shoulders and buckle around your waist.
Like this.
Now pull the tightening straps to secure the entire harness snug around your waist.
When we land, simply unbuckle like this.
Just like mixtapes and neon went out of style in the 80s.
So did smoking on airplanes. There's absolutely no smoking on this flight.
But in the very rare case smoke was ever present in the cabin,
there's a fire extinguisher on the lower left wall, next to your pilot's legs. We're almost there, but there's one thing that makes this flight completely unique. See that big red handle above your head? That's the cap's handle. The parachute handle. Just before we fly, I'll make sure to remove the cap's safety pin. Then in the flight, if the red handle is pulled downward in a steady chin-up pulling motion with about 45 pounds of force, huge parachute will inflate above the airplane and lower us safely to the ground. And remember that you can find additional CAPS information right there on the CAPS cover. The bottom line is that you only need to pull that handle if I wasn't able to land the plane for some reason. Which is unlikely. I mean, look at me. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. Now you are too. So ditch the peanuts. I'm allergic. And bring whatever liquid you want. Cause this is a different type of flying. This is the Cirrus Life. It's a great day for an airplane ride.
Ah, what a great video.
That's great.
Yeah, and if you have creative family, go do one for yourself and just show it to them on an iPad.
So 3 kids
It will make it fun. Well,
Must be a millionaire.
I ended up entering our own meeting.
Or that.
And before I give the word to Harper, few words about our Facebook page. Facebook page, going forward, Chris is doing a good job posting information there. Great post about our fundraiser with RATH across America. I have given a big boost for $10. Got promoted to quite an audience, over 2,000 impressions and over 200 interactions, meaning that people actually clicked on it. So not a lot of money, but we'll see how the fundraiser turns out, right? So there are some good positive comments. So go through the comments, add your comments to this page and share the page in your community, in your network. You can send that to different groups related to aviation, to the Army, to veterans, whatever is applicable to you. Yes?
Just one note on that. For anybody that does have Facebook, clicking like is great, but clicking share is literally about 150 times better, or whatever number of friends you have, that many times better.
And maybe somebody from your friends will share in return and so on.
Because every time you see it, but every time you share it, Facebook shows it to roughly between 20 to 100%, depending on how interactive you are, of your friends list. So those are people that normally wouldn't see our content. So, like is great, but that share button is the best.
Good. All right. So Harper, any updates on your side?
Yeah, we are kind of in, I'm planning to get these posters printed for the Haunted Hangars event, ideally by the end of this week. There's just a few little things. Mainly, we wanted to ask generally everybody about, in terms of like volunteers. We're gonna probably send an email out. We're not sure how many volunteers we're gonna need because it ultimately depends on the capacity, and we need to come up with an end time. What is a reasonable end time for everyone who's going to be participating? Because
we start at 6.
Right.
We should definitely go home by 8, the latest.
8 o'clock. So it would be. See, I think that would actually be a good idea because it would give people some time to go to the event and then they could still trick or treat afterwards. So, yeah, 6 to 8 would probably be a good idea. If it's only a couple of hours in that case, yeah. In terms of the capacity, I was going to ask also, for the previous Nighthawks, what is the most amount of people we've had show up to a Nighthawk?
What I would suggest, don't go to general public because it's controlled environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Send it out to the squadrons in our group.
Yeah.
Okay. And also make posters and distribute it within the community of our airport.
Yeah.
So whomever already have access to the airport naturally, like flight schools, for example.
Yeah, we were thinking of right here, Riverside Flight Academy, and then Next Gen, and then in Chino there's one called Dubois Aviation.
Dubois Aviation, then you can also go to the CBU.
Oh yeah, CBU, of course.
Department. They are big, and they all have access here.
Right, and then of course
that's our
an email.
good target audience.
Yeah, and then an email to the local squadrons, but I'm not sure
Once
how
you draft
much to
the
expand.
email, right, so you have the information, I can distribute it to the airport personnel.
Okay.
And I can also invite Tower to join us. I always invite them for Nighthawk. They never showed up so far, but maybe they will.
Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're looking at now. I guess it's just now the capacity is probably the first thing, because we are going to have an RSVP. I might use my own email, but if not, I'm not sure if I could just make a quick temporary email that people can contact for RSVP. Because if we're still going to have barbecue, we want to make sure we're going to have enough for the people that are going to show up. If we have candy, like grab bags, you know, we could just distribute some little bags.
I have a better idea for you. Actually, we have Microsoft Suite for the whole Civil Air Patrol, free of charge. That includes SharePoint and forms. So you can easily design the form similar to one I use for Nighthawk. I can send you the editable copy of it, and you can modify it to your likings. Make it simple, just name and maybe contact information of a person, make it publicly available, and then you don't need to really flood your email with RSVPs.
Okay.
The information is accumulated in the form of Excel spreadsheet, and you can easily see how many people volunteered or signed up.
Who signed up, yeah. And I'm thinking that for that, we should probably set an end date that people could RSVP, just so that we have time to get
Yeah,
all
make
the
it
stuff.
last Friday before the event.
Yeah, I was thinking of the 25th.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what day the 25th falls on, but 25th
Make it
of
Friday,
Friday
the last
before.
day,
Okay.
and that's it.
So we'd have Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We'd have
We have
3.5
plenty.
days to get everything together. All right, then sounds good.
26th is a Thursday.
26th.
So
So it would be the
27th.
27th. All right.
27th is a Friday.
27 and day.
All
All right. With that, then definitely get those printed out, and we'll start distributing them. Me and where are you at? There you are. Me and him.
And also, we should probably figure on taking turns, guiding people in, because once they show up at the gate, they'll need to be.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would prefer if we cater towards the tenants of the airport. If they show up as a family, that's fine. They are responsible for access, we are not. If we invite whomever, like totally random people, that may be tricky to control, right? And so we don't want too much of responsibility for that. Yes.
Is this one of the events where we get away with parking our cars in that taxiway?
Yeah, we are fine. Most likely, at that time of the day, we are currently the sunset is about what, 7 p.m. So not a lot of people flying.
Right.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? One last item. Next week I will not be here. I will be in Africa at the trade show. Unlikely place for trade show.
Trade show.
Nevertheless, I'll be in Rwanda.
Are you selling spears or what?
So I delegate Chris and Mike to run the meeting.
Uh-oh.
So think about the subjects. You can always go over any emergency services topic. Maybe Terry will come over and give a presentation. We'll see. I will certainly engage Terry in that. So
Yeah, no problem. I'll be here next week.
very good. Okay, thank you everybody. The meeting is adjourned. appreciate everybody coming over.
You know how to input